Greetings, friends, and welcome to this edition of Tales from the Tabletop, the video series where I scour the internet and my own personal experiences to bring you anecdotes of adventure, the fun, the funny, the farcical, and the teachable moments, and I pick my favorite one and illustrate it for your listening and viewing pleasure. Thanks for coming again, great to see you. Let's get started. Today's first story comes from Cabbage-tastrophe. Cool name. I was playing Shadowrun, and we had a bunch of people leave the campaign suddenly. Rather than end it, the GM kept me and another player, that guy, or TG, and TG decided he wanted to change characters. So, he rolled up a weapons guy with a pickup truck he was massively proud of. We had just finished a heist where we'd found some old cash in the CSA, and I had gotten severely jacked up. That guy found me and offered me a ride in exchange for a share. I had no other transport, so I agreed. However, once we were on the road, that guy decided he was going to take 90% as his share. A 90% share of a job he hadn't even been part of. I, of course, disagreed, but that guy threatened to kill me and take all of it. And, again, I was in his truck and injured to hell. And in a foreign country. Illegally. So, eventually, I just agreed to his terms and suggested we pull over and find somewhere to sleep for the night. That guy, flush with his new cash, decided he wanted to get a top-class hotel room. I talked him into sharing the room to save money, and he agreed. So we got into the room and found it had a hot tub in it. Without any prompting from me whatsoever, that guy states, "Oh man, I get in the hot tub and I fall asleep." The GM blinks and asks, "That's what you do? You fall asleep?" "Yeah, I just relax and fall asleep right in the hot tub." The GM said, "Okay, you fall asleep." And then he turns to me, "What are you gonna do?" I said, "I'm going to take the cash and the keys to his truck, and I'm going to get the hell out of there." Just as a side, in real life, falling asleep in a hot tub, a great way to drown in a hot tub. Don't do it. Cue panic. The GM let that guy make a roll to wake, which he failed. So, I steal his truck and all the money and head north towards the UCAS border. I ditch the truck at a bus stop and get on a Greyhound bus. Easier to get across the border that way. That guy wakes up to find everything gone. Without bothering to put his clothes on, he grabs his bag of guns and steals a car, driving like hell to the border where he assumed, correctly, that I had gone. But when he gets to the border, he is of course stopped by Border Patrol, who finds a man in his underwear with a suspiciously lumpy sack in the car next to him, and no proper paperwork. They of course try to detain him, which he responds by shooting one of the patrol officers and trying to ram the barrier, and he botches his driving check. That guy's character ends up ignominiously riddled with bullets from the UCAS Border Patrol, and my character lives happily ever after. Our next story comes from Clefties, or Clefts. I will assume Clefties. Clefties writes, "I made a that guy character on purpose, specifically to get humbled in PvP combat. The DM decided to have a single elimination tournament for just the melee fighters. Terrible decision, significantly contributed to the campaign's end. Since I was playing a wizard and had nothing to do all day, I offered to run an NPC, and then I had fun with it. I took a generic noble who was on the roster, and I played him as the biggest heel I could possibly devise. I made him rich, misogynist, arrogant, sneered as much as possible, terminally stupid, preened about being beautiful. The whole 9 yards. I also built him as a high armor class grappler with low damage output. The out-of-character plan was to be super intimidating, but couldn't actually do enough damage to win. The DM was kind of a jerk to me when we were actually in combat, but besides that, it worked perfectly. The player character got a more interesting fight, and I got to do something during that session. And now, our teachable moment. Clefties has this wonderful bullet point list that I think is definitely worth going over. Here it goes. To DMs, a brief note about tournament arcs in Dungeons & Dragons. DMs, please do not write a tournament arc into your D&D game. If you do make a tournament, please have it be a grand melee where the entire party can participate. If it is not a grand melee, please don't divide the melee and arrange competitions to separate in-game days. If you do divide the melee and ranged competitions, please hold them in separate sessions so the players don't have to just sit and watch other people for an extended period of time. If you're going to have all the players watch each other compete, make sure they have equal challenges. So, make the archery more than 3 sets of skill checks. And make the reward for each side of the tournament equal, so that the archers don't feel like second-class players. And please, don't run the melee portion as a bracket. It will take forever. Don't make the archers wait until 2 hours into the session before they get to participate in anything. If you're going to have a bracket, make it more tolerable that it is the smallest bracket ever with only 6 NPCs. Still, you don't have to divide this tiny bracket into multiple days in-game. But speaking of NPCs, please run them as a stat block rather than as character sheets. If you do decide to make sheets for each NPC, please make sure the math is correct on the sheets. And make sure you know how to play each of those classes so you're not reading the basic features out of the player's handbook during the combat. If you give an NPC to a wizard's player so that they have something to do, please don't smugly root against that player once they're in combat. Yeah, douche move. Don't do that. I mean, just as a general rule. I believe this is a golden rule of RPGs in general. Game masters, do not root against the players. Bad. It is bad for everyone, most of all, the GM themselves. And please, dear DMs, once the players are doing the PvP combat that you engineered, do not pull out your phone and check out what's going on. Just as a general rule, put the daggone phone away when you're playing these games. I am a huge fan. Books, graph paper, pencils, everything else goes away. Full disclosure, I usually have a laptop out because I've got noises and music on there, but I digress. Don't roll your eyes and call it tedious when this is what you planned. The Bard's ADHD player had nothing to do for hours and had no negativity about the whole thing, so the least you could do is stay engaged. But for one quick way to avoid all of these problems, DMs, please do not write a tournament arc into your D&D game. Due to out-of-game relationship drama, this campaign is on hiatus. I can't say that I'm sorry about this particular consequence. Toro's Prime writes, maybe I was being too subtle. My boss asked for ideas for team building activities members of our department could be involved in outside of work. Nothing official, just casual stuff to build some social ties outside of the office. I made the suggestion of a D&D campaign, and to my shock, people actually wanted to do it. So I put together a short campaign based on the movie John Carpenter's The Thing, with a mimic having invaded a dwarf mine and the players being sent to find out what happened and restore the mine to functioning condition. While the players get to the mine and start exploring, they encounter a lone dwarf wielding a broken shovel, demanding they prove who they are. I made him crippled and super low power, such that even a level 1 character should be at no risk from him, provided they could roll well enough to grab him. Well, after 3 rounds of him attempting to attack them, and failing, all of the players tried to pin him down, and failed to do so. One of the players set him on fire, while one of the other players finally grabbed him, and then realized he was on fire, so attempted to put him out. And when that didn't work, declared that they were going to throw him out of the cave and into a lake. I confirmed that they wanted to throw him into the lake that was outside the cave, which they did. They then rolled a natural 20 for the throw. I proceeded to narrate how they just threw this flaming dwarf out of the cave, off the end of the cliff, and he went sailing down roughly 100 feet into the lake as the player says, "Oh, right, we had to climb up. Is he still alive?" I responded, "He was starved, insane with paranoia, set on fire, and then thrown from roughly 10 stories up into a lake. No, he is not still alive." Team building! One of the comments reads, "So, you base your campaign on a horror movie in which the characters have difficulty trusting each other, and you did this for team building. Bold move. How did it all play out?" Toro's Prime responds, "Well, they took a paranoid, emaciated miner, set him on fire, and then threw him down a 10-story fall into a waterfall. So, room for improvement." This next story is the one that I've been illustrating the whole time. It took a lot longer than I thought it would, but the story necessitated the time. It's a lot of fun. I'm very happy to share this with you. The story comes from John. It is titled King Grom. The party. Grom, the half-orc barbarian, played by me. Calcetes, the human fighter. And Usajik, the half-elven paladin. It might be Usajik or Usajik with like the soft Y. I'm going with soft J. I'm going with a hard J. It was our first adventure together. Nothing crazy. Clear out a goblin cave, retrieve the relic. Simple. It was more than enough for us to get our feet wet and used to this new edition of the game. We had to retrieve the artifact to show we were worthy of entering a grand tournament. It was my first time playing a barbarian, a half-orc, which I drew as a full orc because it's more fun that way. As such, I wanted to play it right. Cal, being human and lacking the ability to see in the dark, lights a torch. I thought he was half-elven. Okay, well. After some goblins manage to find us, it's time to roll for initiative. On Grom's turn, first combat ever. Remember, let's do barbarians right. So I say, I rip the torch from Cal's hands and attempt to impale a goblin with it. On the next round, finally time to draw my great axe? No, let's dropkick the goblin instead. Consider both attempts failed due to rolling poorly. I tried something much more standard and finally pulled my axe. Small green creatures were finally being cleaved in two. Cal and Usajik had been doing fine, and Grom had to catch up. He couldn't be outdone by a human or a knife-eared half-elf. As we traveled deeper and deeper into the caves, we discovered something troubling. All Goblin clan caves were connected. And all the clans were here, in a grand cavern, having a lands meet. The three of us, and then over 100 goblins. But we had a job to do. Grom got thinking. He was slightly green. So were the goblins. And in his clan, the strongest ruled. Maybe it was the same for these little green things too. While in the shadows outside the Grand Tavern, Grom managed to find oil, and the goblins had been using it for various purposes. He decided to coat his axe in it. And so Grom calmly by half-orc standards, walked into the center of the meeting.
Grom challenges leadership of the clans.
Silence from the characters. The goblins, the players, and the DM. During this silence, Grom walked into a small circle, kicking away dust-covered stone floors of the cavern. Apparently, the strongest did rule their clans. Out from another cave stepped an ogre.
Solo combat. Grom versus Ogre. Fight!
My half-orc won the initiative and charged, but not before dragging his axe against the stone, igniting the oil into flaming great axe. I have no doubt the DM wanted to reward me for my creativity. Grom and the ogre traded blows for what seemed like an eternity. I'd managed to get enough swings into its face, particularly its left eye. It had a bit of trouble aiming at me after that with its great club. The dungeon master described the visceral scene. Grom was battered, covered in blood. A lot of it was his own. The ogre's face was gouged deeply, one eye missing chunks and wounded. The next person to land a blow would undoubtedly be the victor. And it was the ogre's turn. Ogre rolled a 19. He only needed 15. My barbarian was down. The players' jaws dropped. The characters had been cheering. Some goblins had begun cheering for Grom, but he was out. I stared at my character sheet, looking for something, anything, and I saw it. One more shot. When an attack reduces you to 0 hit points, but doesn't outright kill you, you can instead fall to 1 hit point and remain conscious. Grom was still going, but he had nothing else after this. One final attack, one swing, and it was a good one. The ogre collapsed, great axe still stuck in its skull. Grom throws his hands up in triumph. Usajik, the paladin, rushes to his side to heal him. Calcetes ensures nobody tries to pull any funny business.
Grom now referred to himself as King Grom, ruler of the Goblin Kingdom of Offville.
He selects one goblin to accompany him. He selects Calcetes as his sergeant-at-arms, and appoints Usajic as the ambassador for his kingdom whilst on their adventures. Back in the city, at the start of the first round of the tournament, Grom demands to be treated like nobility. He even managed to procure a cheap copper crown that he proudly wore. During his adventures, Grom would spend his downtime talking with the goblin about how their kingdom would rise to prominence, and how they could fix the goblin economy. Whenever Grom did something that'd get him in trouble, he would often scream,
"Diplomatic immunity!"
Diplomatic immunity!
at any town guards who would attempt to arrest him.
Just been revoked.
I love that story, for obvious reasons. And of course I had to draw it because orc barbarian versus giant ogre, and it comes down to the wire. Priceless. Of course I have to draw that, especially with goblins cheering in the background. The composition for this one, I definitely tried channeling some more Frank Frazetta. I'm definitely digging deep into Frazetta's his tricks in terms of composition. And I've only got the one art book and the internet to go off of. I need more. But I'm fairly pleased with the result. Now, there is a problem. I was looking very much forward to drawing an ogre and an orc all busted up and bloody, but in black and white I realized it's rather difficult for me to pull off because the blood would be inked black, and there's already so much black and so much hatching. I was worried that it would ruin the silhouettes and make the entire thing more difficult to read as action, so instead I just put a bunch of claw marks on them. I had another composition that I wanted for this, but it was much less action-packed. It was much more, just standing and breathing heavy, all bloody before the next blow comes down. And I thought that this action pose had more motion, more dynamic into it, and I made it as a black and white, but I think that I might come back in color this later, and if I do, I'll let you know. If you'd like the original art from this episode, you can find it on my website at coffeeandhate.biz. Click store at the top. And in the meantime, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, may your dice roll high and never be cursed.